On gentle Celtic nights, when the ground is still damp with dew and the moon's light is only strong enough to trace the horizon, the world can feel slightly wider than it should. Deep within that stillness, a faint passage seems to appear between drifting mist and ancient stone. No one truly sees it, yet anyone who lingers long enough senses something small, quiet, like the breath of a presence that has waited for ages. In these lands, where the sky rests close to the water, the line between what can be seen and what can only be felt grows thin as thread, and sometimes, through that fragile veil, something steps one pace closer. For centuries, the Celtic people believed that mist-covered places were gateways to another realm, not a heaven, not a hell, but a parallel domain where light moves slower and memory never fades. They called it the otherworld, a place not far away, yet never truly part of the mortal world. And within it lived beings who did not live as humans do, did not die as humans do, but moved between realms as though time itself could not keep them still. In valleys echoing with the sound of water, in ash forests bowing under northern winds, every supernatural figure was born from a quiet human need, the need to name what is most feared: death, loneliness, the feeling of losing one's way, the small, stubborn hope that remains when all paths seem to close. These beings, shifting in form across generations, were the way the old world gave shape to the unseen, so that the forces of nature were no longer faceless, but could be touched, understood, and retold. The Celtic world of myth does not turn on battles between good and evil. It moves through subtler signs: a dry leaf carried toward an empty clearing, the shadow of an animal gliding under moonlight, a sound rising from a place where no person stands. These delicate motions remind us that this world is not built only of stone and water, but also of things that cannot be held or measured, yet can be sensed by instinct. And within that fragile instinct, the first sound emerges, a sound not born of wind, nor of anything that still draws breath. It is a thin cry, fine as a thread, drifting across the grass and slipping through the cracks of an old wooden door. It does not summon, it does not plead. It simply announces that something is about to unfold, something no one can turn away. The Celtic people gave this sound a name one carried through generations, tied to home, to lineage, to a fracture that cannot be mended. And the moment that cry touches the night, another story begins to step out of the mist, slow as a messenger arriving at the threshold. It is the story of the Banshee. There are nights when that cry sounds neither human nor holy wind. It is soft, thin, yet it seeps through wooden walls, the way water sinks into soil. The Celtic people believed that when this sound passed over a home, the soul about to leave the world would not wander alone, because a spirit was awake, watching, guiding the sorrow, so it would not be forgotten. They called her the Banshee, the woman of ancient burial mounds, where the path to the otherworld was once believed to begin. She is not a demon. She does not come to claim a life. Her presence is more like a candle lit before the darkness arrives. From afar, her lament shifts in tone according to the grief carried by a family line. Some nights it rises, sharp and glass-like, as if something fragile has shattered in the air. Other nights it falls low, heavy and worn, like the sob of someone who has cried too long to remember the name of their sorrow. For many old families, having a banshee near was a sign of ancestry deep enough to hold memory, long enough to hold roots. Clans such as the O'Neill or O'Brien saw her as an extension of their lineage, a witness standing at the edge of human life, present only to whisper farewell when the moment came. Not everyone could hear her. Strangers, newcomers, those without roots in the land, they were not the ones she sought. The Banshee moved only toward places where history lived, where sorrow had settled long before the people themselves. In ancient villages, the keening women who mourned at funerals, the Bean Cheowinter, were once familiar figures. They did not simply cry for others. They cried on behalf of those unable to speak their grief. When folklore placed that voice into a supernatural being, it did not create something strange. It merely gave soul to the sorrow. The The banshee became the first echo so that, when death approached, the living would not feel abandoned. But her form is never fixed. At times she appears as a young woman with long hair and eyes reddened by years of weeping. At other times she is a small, bent old woman, bowed long before her age. These faces do not contradict each other. They mirror the two rhythms of grief: a young grief, unsure what to do with loss, and an old grief, so familiar it no longer struggles against it. And each time she appears, the household knows the night will be longer than most, not from fear, but because her presence thickens the air, as though the memories of an entire lineage are gathered beside the door, waiting in silence for what must come. In many stories, it is said that sometimes the banshee does not cry at all. She simply stands by a mound of earth, looking toward a house lit from within, with the gaze of someone who already knows what the next dawn will bring. And from that moment, the Celtic people understood that sorrow does not wear a single face. It comes in many forms, many quiet layers. One of those layers, a form both beautiful and withered by time, is now stepping closer. In the old stories, the Celtic people often said the banshee had no fixed face. Grief never stays still, and so her form shifts with every change of wind and every fold of fate. Some nights, she appears as a young woman, hair silver as mist, eyes red from weeping across many lifetimes. Other nights, she is a frail old woman, wrapped in a grey shawl as thin as morning fog. These shapes do not oppose each other. They are simply two breaths of the same sorrow. When she arrives in her youthful form, the death that follows is said to be gentle, a passing marked by regret rather than terror, like a flower falling because its fragrance has grown too heavy, not because a storm has torn it down. The young banshee does not spread panic. She stands at a distance, letting the wind carry her lament ahead of her, a soft herald that a soul is preparing to leave with tender steps. But when she comes as an old woman, people know the death to come will not be peaceful. It is often a heavy death, a fracture pulling fear along with it. Her aged form does not frighten because of its appearance. It frightens because it mirrors the memory of time, something no human can hold back. In that lined face, people glimpse their own journey, slow, long, and fated to end in silence. The elders believed that these changes were not meant to deceive. The banshee simply chose the form that best matched the story the approaching death was about to tell. A young death carries the sting of new sorrow. An old death carries the closing chapter of an entire life. She does not change her nature. It is only that her grief has many colors, and every person sees the one meant for them. There is a small detail often overlooked. She is said to carry a silver comb. The Celtic people, and just as her sorrow lingers at that thin frontier, another being brighter, more elusive, mischievous as glimmering water begins to step out from the ancient shadows. Along the western coasts of Ireland, people say there are mornings when the sea lies so still that sky and water become the same pale surface. In that moment, if one looks closely at the edge of the rocks, a small movement may appear like a leaf lifted by a gentle wave. But it is no leaf. It is the sign of a spirit that once belonged to the water before choosing another form sharper, more cunning, and closer to humankind than any other Celtic being. They call it the leprechaun. In the oldest tales, the leprechaun does not wear green, does not dance, and does not guard pots of gold beneath rainbows. That image is a later shadow, shaped by centuries of commercialization. The original version is very different. In the earlier stories, leprechauns were creatures of the sea, small, powerful spirits who once tried to drag King Fergus into the cold waves in the oldest recorded tale. They were not patient craftsmen then, but carried the fierce breath of water, swift, mysterious, sometimes gentle, sometimes perilous. But as time moved on, and human life changed its rhythm, their form shifted too. From spirits of the sea, the leprechaun slowly became a creature tied to the land. They no longer lived within waves, but in cracks of stone, hollows of trees, places untouched by storm, but still echoing with the memory of the sea. In those small spaces, they began crafting tiny shoes, a craft no one knows who taught them. Legend says the fairy folk, who danced through the night, were always tearing their shoes, and someone had to mend them. With quick hands and a sharp mind, the leprechaun became the cobbler of the other world. The tap-tap of a tiny hammer became the clearest sign that one of them was nearby. The Celtic people believed that if you heard that sound at noon, in the quietest hour, you might be standing close to their hidden treasure. But skill made them tricksters as well. Leprechauns were said to carry a silver coin that never ran out, or a pot of gold buried where only they could find it. Anyone who captured one could demand the treasure's location. But if that person looked away for even a heartbeat for a buzzing insect, a passing cow, or any distraction the leprechaun crafted, everything vanished. The gold, the spirit, everything but a faint laugh drifting from the stones. To the Celtic mind, the leprechaun was never a monster, but a test. They embodied luck, quick to appear, quicker to slip away. They reminded humans that wealth, opportunity, and every good thing require vigilance to keep. Lose focus for a single breath, and the open hand becomes empty again, as if it never touched wonder at all. Yet if the leprechaun is the mischievous laughter at the forest's edge, then in the darkness of deep cellars, another version of them begins to emerge. Half kin, half stranger, carrying the scent of strong drink and the chaos of long, unruly nights. Its story begins where the light cannot reach. In the old houses of Ireland, where lamplight spills down stone steps and darkness clings to every seam of the walls, there are corners no one likes to linger in, not out of fear, but because in those dim spaces, the scent of aged wine hangs heavier than it should, as if someone has already been drinking before the owner arrived. The old people believed that wherever a cask lid trembles softly at night, the shadow of a cluricaun is near the wild brother of the leprechaun. If the leprechaun is the sharp, playful laugh of midday, then the cluricaun belongs to the late hours when joy begins to lose its shape. He does not live by the shore or in the hollows of trees. He chooses the deep wine cellars, where the air is still, where humans store what they hope to save for celebration. And there, among wooden shelves and waiting barrels, his form appears small, quick, always carrying the warmth of drink on his breath. People say the cluricaun resembles the leprechaun so closely that one glance is not enough to tell them apart, but their natures differ. Where the leprechaun is cunning and measured, the cluricaun throws himself into any revelry he finds. He drinks as easily as breathing, and with every swallow, his laughter spills into the dark, long, unsteady, and no longer truly joyful. It carries a shadowed note, a thin sadness behind the drunken mirth. Yet the cluricaun is not always a creature of mischief. Some tales speak of nights when he guards an entire cellar simply because its owner treated the wine with care. He sits atop a wooden cask, watching over each scent of aging drink, chasing off thieves or vandals. When respected, he returns that respect with an uncanny loyalty, not a loyalty to people, but to the joy they protect. But when slighted, the cluricaun becomes pure chaos. He sours the wine, he knocks objects off the shelves, he rides the household's dogs and cats through the corridors the moment the lights go out. Some families, worn down by his nightly antics, have even abandoned their homes. Yet the legends say that when they unpacked the very last cask in their new house, there he was inside, smiling as he declared, "I go with you." To the Celtic mind, the cluricaun is not evil. He is joy that slips from one's grasp, joy no longer held by intention, but by habit, by losing oneself. He is laughter stretched too long, a celebration that refuses to end, relief turned into burden. And within all that disorder, the cluricaun reminds people of something the old world understood well. Excess, whether in grief or in delight, leads the same way into shadow. Moderation is what keeps the hearth fire burning. But when it comes to tending the fire of a home, the Celtic world knew another spirit, one neither drunken nor mischievous, one that sought no gold or wine. A spirit that entered quiet kitchens at night and left the mark of care rather than chaos. And that is where the story turns next, toward a gentler presence, one more fragile than any magic. In the rural corners of Scotland and the Isle of Man, where peat roofs hold the cold and night wind slips through every seam, there are kitchens that glow, even though no hand has touched the fire. At dawn, people wake to find ashes neatly gathered, brooms set upright, or a heap of tangled wool from the night before, suddenly straightened, as if a small hand had worked without rest. When these quiet signs appear, they know a brownie has passed through. A brownie does not belong to the unruly darkness of the Cluricaun, nor to the watery mischief of the old leprechauns. The brownie belongs to the home, more specifically, to its quietest heart, the hearth. Legend says brownies are small, furred, gentle beings who almost never show themselves to the living. They work only after the household sleeps, stepping as lightly as drifting ash. Their labor is swift, clean, and without desire for praise. The only thing a brownie expects is a small bowl of cream or warm porridge left by the hearth. Not payment, a gesture of gratitude. The Celtic people believed that the bond with a brownie was unlike any relationship with other spirits. It was not a contract, not a bargain, not a plea. It was a kind of unspoken ethic, an acknowledgement that sometimes the smallest acts keep life from falling into disorder. But brownies are easily wounded. The greatest taboo, repeated in every tale, is giving them new clothes, not because they dislike them, but because the gift turns gratitude into wages, breaking the purity of the bond. The moment the clothes are placed by the fire, the brownie will stop its work, whisper a farewell so faint it might be mistaken for wind, and leave the home forever. The hearth fire will still burn, but the house loses a warmth only that unseen hand could bring. The old stories emphasize that no brownie ever leaves in anger. They leave in sadness. It is the sorrow of a being who understands the value of care, but cannot accept reward for it, because reward distorts its very purpose. A brownie's departure is not punishment. It is a reminder. Some things in life exist only when we do not try to pay for them. They survive through appreciation, not transaction. In Celtic life, the brownie carried an even deeper truth. A household stands firm only when someone keeps its rhythm, even if that someone is never seen. The brownie is the embodiment of quiet endurance, and to the old world, that unseen care mattered as much as the power of any god beyond the walls. Yet there are nights when the hearth goes still, the ashes do not stir, and even the wind cannot shift the smoke. In that stillness, people sense an emptiness they cannot explain, not because the brownie has left, but because something else is rising in the dark, an embodiment of death itself, a being that does not tidy, does not guard, does not wait for gratitude, a being that rides on cold wind, carrying the silence of fate, and needs only one appearance to be remembered forever. Along the narrow paths of ancient Ireland, where night mist clings to the grass, and the air hangs thick like a curtain not yet drawn, there are moments so silent one can almost hear the heartbeat of the earth. The old people believed that in this stillness, a dark rider emerges, not stepping from the forest, nor from any road, but pulling himself out of the darkness and sinking back into it just as easily. This is the Dullahan, the headless horseman whom the Celtic world saw as the final sign before death enters a home. They described the Dullahan riding a great black horse, larger than any beast owned by the living. Its eyes glowed like burning coals, its breath cold as dawn frost. But it was the rider who made the air collapse inward. In his right hand he carried his own head, eyes wide open, forever looking forward, as if searching for someone in the night. A faint green light seeped from that severed head, illuminating the ground and the cold stone walls. Each time the light trembled, people knew something or someone was being called. The Dullahan does not hunt. He does not knock. He simply stops. And when he stops, fate stops with him. Legend says he speaks only one word, the name of the one about to die. The instant that name is spoken, the soul tears itself from the body as though pulled by an unseen force. No one resists. No one bargains. The Dullahan does not come to warn, nor to frighten. He is the final moment, the second after which all prayers fall silent. At times, It is not the Dullahan himself who arrives first, but his carriage. They call it the death coach, a wagon woven from skin and bone, its wheels gliding above the ground. No hooves, no turning axles, only a flickering lantern at its front, shining through the hollow eyes of skulls hung like guiding lights. This carriage never passes a home without cause. It travels only to the place where a soul has already been named. Yet among all things linked to the Dullahan, the Celtic people believed one truth above all. He fears gold. Not piles of it, a single piece. A pin, a small ring is enough to halt him, startling him like brightness striking the edge of shadow. Some say gold embodies a purity that cannot be broken. Perhaps that is why even death must step back from its glow. What makes the Dullahan unforgettable is not the horror he brings, but the silence surrounding him, a silence so complete the world seems to pause mid-breath. Wind stops, leaves hold still. In that moment, people sense how thin the line between life and death truly is, and how the Dullahan stands only as its keeper, without hatred, without mercy. But not all Celtic beings come to take. Some come to guide not with words, not with hands, but with a longing that binds them to a place they once belonged. One such being rises from the deep sea. Its heart never settled on land, even though its form walks here. And from that longing, the next story begins. As the shadow of the Dullahan fades, the story quiets like the sea after a passing wind. And within that stillness, the Celtic people say another spirit rises, not from forest, not from cellar, but from farther away from the surface of the water opening like a door. It is the moment when the world of land and the world beneath the waves touch each other in silence. From that brief crossing, the Selkie takes form. The old tales say that on gentle nights, when the moon lays a milky glow across the sea, seals swim closer to shore. Some pull themselves onto the rocks, resting as if only for a breath. But sometimes, those seals shed their rounded skins, and beneath the wet, shining hide, a human shape steps out beautiful, in a way that does not belong to land. Soft as wind, yet distant as the deep. A Selkie can remain on shore only if their skin is kept safe. If the skin disappears, they cannot return to the sea. They are trapped in human form, even as their heart strains toward the waves that once opened the path for them. From this fragile detail, the saddest of the Selkie legends is born. The famous tale of Orkney and Shetland tells of a man who saw a Selkie on a midsummer night. When she shed her skin and stepped ashore, moonlight made her into something no mortal could look away from. Enchanted, he hid her skin in a crevice of stone. When she could not find it, despair washed over her, for she knew she could never return. With no other choice, she went home with the man and became his wife. She was gentle, tended the household, and bore his children. Villagers said she was kind and quiet, as though afraid her sadness might trouble others. Yet every evening, she stood facing the sea, her eyes pulled by a longing that could not be dimmed, a longing not for a person, but for the place she truly belonged. Years passed. Then one ordinary day, their child found the hidden skin tucked in the rafters. The child brought it to her, unaware it held two worlds inside it. The moment her fingers touched the salt-worn hide, the longing she had buried surged upward like a breaking wave. She embraced her child, wept without a sound, and left the house as though running after her own heart. When she reached the water, the sea seemed to open its arms again. The story often ends there, no blame, no praise. For the Celtic people understood that some longings do not belong to the land and cannot be bound by any home, no matter how full of love. The Selkie embodies that truth, a soul wearing human shape, but not meant to live as human. The tales also say that Selkie children carry strange marks, thin webs between fingers or toes, as traces of two worlds woven together. They belong neither to sea nor to shore, living with a gentle fracture that cannot be mended. And when the Selkie returns to the water, the old people say the sea does not swallow her. It gives her back to the place where she was born, back to the rhythm her heart always knew. But not all beings of the sea carry such tender sorrow. there is another spirit born from the waves, one without a soft heart. When winter winds rise and the sea crashes against the rocks like the fists of someone enraged, that spirit comes ashore, bringing with it the sudden vanishing of every trace of warmth. As the Selkies' silhouette melts into the salt-lit horizon, the sea grows heavier, darker, as though it has closed one gentle door, only to open another deep, violent, and full of breathless wrath. The Celtic people believed the sea held two voices, one of longing and one of anger. And if the Selkie is the sigh of the water, then the Nucalavi is its roar, the voice of the ocean's spirit when it has grown weary of human harm. The legends of Orkney say the Nucalavi is not a creature of the shore. It belongs to the pitch-dark realm beneath the waves, where storms are born and where no eye can follow. But in winter, when the north wind lashes the coast and the sea strikes the rocks like an enraged beast, the door between the two worlds opens. And from that breach, the Nucalavi rises, bringing with it the stench of salt, plague, and the rot of ruined harvests. No creature in Celtic lore inspires dread the way the Nucalavi does. They say it has no skin. Its entire body, a fused form of horse and rider, is exposed. Red muscle bright against the night, yellow cords of tendon, dark veins twitching under moonlight. The human torso grows out of the horse's back in a way that defies all order of nature. Its arms are long enough that the hands almost scrape the earth. Its eyes do not glow, they blaze, like fire trapped in a wind cave. Every breath it releases spreads a poisonous vapor that withers grass and knocks livestock to the ground within moments. Islanders claimed that whenever the Nucalavi appeared, sickness washed over the land like floodwater, barley rotted, drinking wells soured, people's skin erupted in burning rash. Some stories tie its fury to the smoke from seaweed fires, kelp, a practice once common among coastal folk. They burned kelp for ash used in dye and fertilizer, but the smoke drifted far, falling back into the ocean. In the eyes of the Nucalavi, it was an insult, and so it rose, a vengeance from the deep, carrying the rage of waters humans believed they had mastered. Yet even this creature carries a weakness so strange that the Celtic people saw it as proof of the balance woven through all myth. The Nucalavi cannot cross fresh water. The smallest stream halts it, drives it back, makes it scream as though purity itself burns. No one knows why. Some say fresh water is a cleansing force the sea cannot endure. Others claim it was a boundary set long ago, ensuring humans had one refuge left. One of the oldest stories tells of a cattle herder chased across the moors by the Nucalavi. Winds stung his eyes. Its breath burned like furnace smoke. When it was nearly upon him, he leapt across the smallest stream in the region, just a ribbon of water a few strides wide. The Nucalavi lunged, hooves tearing soil, but froze at the water's edge, releasing a scream so fierce it twisted the wind. Then it retreated, dissolving into mist as though it had never been there. No one knows whether the herder ran by instinct or by some ancestral warning, but the tale endured through generations, reminding people that even the sea's rage has a boundary just enough for humans to cling to life. In the Celtic world, the Nucalavi is the unmasked face of nature's terror, the fear of winter, the dread of disease, the peril of the deep. It is the shape of everything beyond human control. But not all dangers take such a defined form. Some begin as a faint shimmer, beautiful yet perilous, delicate yet capable of leading a wanderer astray with a single misplaced step. And in the cold, wet marshes, the next story flickers to life like the first spark in the dark. Across the marshlands of England and Scotland, where the ground is so soft, a single misplaced step can swallow an ankle. There are nights when a light appears like a promise. It is small, like the first flame of a new candle, pale, green, floating, trembling even when there is no wind. Those who wander in the dark often stop when they see it, for in the emptiness of deep bogs, any glimmer resembles the sign of a nearby home. But this light does not stay still. It drifts back a little, pauses, then waits as though inviting someone to follow. And for many, that is the first step toward a place with no return. The Celtic people gave it many names. Willow, the wisp, Jacko, lantern, and in Scotland, hinky punk. But whatever the name, its nature remains the same. It appears when the night is deep enough, and when the human heart feels most alone. It is not a bright light. It is a light that knows how to beckon, a light that convinces the wanderer that something good lies just ahead, if only they walk a little farther. In some tales, the will-o'-the-wisp is a mischievous spirit, leading travelers into the bog for play, but in many others, it is the wandering soul of someone who died young, or violently, or in a place where no one ever found them. They drift between mist and mud, carrying a faint glow not to help the living, but to reclaim the attention they lost in life. A fragile shimmer, like memory trying to hold on to those who remain. Marshland folk have long understood that following strange lights is dangerous. The bog does not forgive. It is wide and still. It keeps secrets by swallowing whatever walks upon it. Anyone led too far from the main path soon loses the sense of firm ground. One wrong step, the mud grips the knees. Two wrong steps, the cold water rises to the chest. By the time the wanderer understands, the light is gone, leaving behind the untouched darkness, as if nothing had ever been there. What is striking is that the Celts never gave the will-o'-the-wisp a clear malice. It is not a monster. It is the shape of misplaced hope, a light that makes one believe they're moving towards safety while each step, in truth, leads farther away. The elders understood that the greatest danger is not the darkness, but the thing that looks like guidance yet leads nowhere. Later, when science explained the phenomenon as the cool flame of methane released by decaying plants, the legend did not vanish. It simply changed roles. No longer a supernatural warning, it became the way ancestors taught their children that in unfamiliar lands, goodness does not always shine clearly. Some things carry only the appearance of guidance, not the intention of it. And when the wanderer turns away from that trembling light, the Celtic world reminds them that other omens remain far more fearsome. Not a glow in the marsh, but a bark echoing across the highlands. 3 cries, each like a silent countdown. And if the third cry sounds, while one still stands beneath the open sky, the soul must depart in fear. Across the wide highlands of Scotland, where wind sweeps the earth like an unseen river and cloud shadows glide quickly over the hills, there are evenings so quiet that every footstep seems to echo outward. Those who walk alone in such places often sense something peculiar, not that they are being followed, but that they are being waited for, as if a presence stands just beyond the air itself, watching, not attacking, not approaching, simply waiting for the proper moment. The Celtic people named this presence Cuath, the hound of the other world. It does not resemble any earthly dog, as large as a calf, its fur the deep green of ancient forests, and its long braided tail curling behind it. Despite its size, it moves without sound. It appears like a shadow sliding across stone and vanishes just as quietly. But that silence is only the beginning, for the Cuath does not hunt with teeth or claws. It hunts with its bark. The legends say that once Cuath has chosen a soul, it will bark exactly 3 times. The first bark rolls through the valley like a sudden shift of wind. The second makes the ground beneath the listener feel tight, as if the earth itself is bracing. And the third, if the person has not reached shelter, has not touched a rooftop or crossed a protective threshold, will tear the soul from the body in sheer terror. No marks, no struggle, only a quiet, sudden departure, as silent as the Cuath's arrival. In ancient villages, elders warn children, never stand outside when a bark comes from the high hills. Not to frighten them, but because the wild land keeps its own laws. The Cuath is not malicious. It simply fulfills its role, to escort the soul to the other world at the proper moment. Not early, not late. Timing, in the Celtic worldview, mattered deeply. A soul could cross safely, only if guided. Not all spirits are thieves like the Slua. Some, like Cuath, are gatekeepers, those who call when the path between worlds opens. The presence of Cuath mirrored a profound fear of the highlands, the fear of dying in the wilderness, without shelter, without witness, where a soul could easily lose its way between stone and wind. The three barks, therefore, were not merely omens of death, they were reminders that the line between safety and danger is sometimes as thin as an unopened door. One of the oldest versions tells of a man who escaped Cuath by running to the edge of the village and touching a stone wall just before the third bark rang out. When he turned back, the land behind him was utterly still. No shadow, no tracks, just the emptiness of wind. But everyone understood that Cuath had not been stopped. It had simply honored its rule. Cuath, in the language of archetype, is the embodiment of the summoner, the one who calls when the moment is ripe. It does not force departure. It only names the instant humans cannot delay. And when its bark fades and the highlands return to their quiet, the Celtic tale of death reveals another face. Not a caller, but a silent watcher by the water's edge. A spirit bends over a small stream there, washing something no one wishes to see. In the south of Ireland, where old church walls still hold their moss and the wind sighs through ancient graveyards, people tell of a woman who never left the mortal world, even though her body has long returned to earth. They call her Diarg Dú, the red blood drinker, though her story does not begin with blood. It begins with love, and the price paid when love is stolen. They say she was a beautiful young woman of Waterford, so striking that word of her beauty travelled far beyond her village. She loved a young man, gentle, ordinary, kind, and they vowed to stay together for life. But their love weighed less to her father than land and gold. To gain wealth, he forced her into marriage with a wealthy, cruel chieftain. Her life within that cold stone fortress became a cage. At night, no one heard her cry. Yet the entire village knew she was slowly dying from the despair tightening around her heart. At last, her strength failed. She stopped eating, stopped speaking, faded into silence, like a shadow losing light. One day, her body was laid to rest in a small churchyard beneath a bare mound, marked only by a few stones. People believed she had finally found peace, but the Celtic world had long understood. Sorrows left unspoken do not sleep. A year after her burial, under the same moon that shone on the night she died, the earth above her grave stirred, and Diarg Dú rose again. Not as a monster, she returned in the same beauty that once captivated all who saw her, but that beauty had hollowed, cooled, turned into a shell filled with compressed agony. Her gaze no longer belonged to the living. She sought the two men who had broken her life, the cruel husband and the father who betrayed her. By morning they were found pale as chalk, bodies shriveled as though fear itself had drained them. No one knew what had happened, yet everyone understood that justice had been claimed in ways the living could not touch. After that, Diarg Dú did not return to her grave. Each year, when the moon turned red, she rose and walked through the village, moving lightly as though her feet no longer touched the earth. She never harmed women or children. Her vengeance was for young men, especially those drawn to beauty without seeing the pain behind it. She did not hunt for their blood. She hunted for the understanding she was never granted in life. To keep her from rising, villagers would heap stones on her grave each year, trying to weigh her down. But even if they could hold her body in the earth, her spirit slipped through the stories, reminding people that love betrayed does not disappear, it changes shape, and that shape can be more terrifying than any creature born of forest or shadow. Diarg Dú is the archetype of the wronged woman, one who becomes darkness not out of malice, but because her pain found no refuge. And as people told her tale with fear edged by sorrow, they also spoke of another Irish figure, one who rose from death not for justice, but for blood. That was Abhartach, his story saved for another night, when myth demands a sharper face. For now, the wind shifts once more, and in the northern valleys, people look toward the hilltops and see a different kind of light, no lure, no warning, but the glow of an ancient war between two divine clans, moving toward its fated moment. When the tales of shadow and grief begin to fade, The Celtic landscape seems to open into another depth entirely, a depth not shaped by wandering spirits of forest or sea, but by an age when the world was still new, when order had no definition, and light did not yet know where it began. In that immeasurable twilight of creation, the Celtic people believed a divine tribe descended from the 4 northern cities, carrying knowledge, power, and sacred treasures, not meant for mortal hands. They were the Tuatha Dé Danann, the people of the goddess Danu. They did not arrive by ship, nor on horseback. They came through cloud, like light poured upon the land. From each of the 4 cities came a treasure, the Lia Fal, the stone that cried out beneath a rightful king, Lug's spear, which never missed its mark, Nuada's invincible sword, and the Dagda's cauldron, from which no feast ever ran empty. These were more than relics. They were symbols of a world's foundations: sovereignty, skill, strategy, and sustenance. To the Celtic mind, they were the 4 principles upon which any civilization must stand. The Tuatha Dé Danann were not gods in the modern sense. They did not hover apart from the land. They were part of the land. They held the wisdom of wind, understood the pulse of the sun, and carried magic as naturally as breath. Their beauty was not of form, but of presence still, as moonlight resting on granite, luminous yet distant, gentle yet cold. Under the guidance of Nuada, and later of the Dagda and Lug, the Tuatha Dé Danann shaped order across the land they touched. They taught humankind to mark the seasons, to read the signs of the sky, and to respect the boundaries between the mortal world and the other world. Their presence was not domination, but unfolding the creation of a framework that allowed humans to live with nature rather than against it. But because they belonged to light, they cast a shadow. The order they brought was not the only force dwelling in the world. Deep beneath the sea and across the wild, unclaimed regions lived another lineage, older, harsher, unwilling to bend. And so the Tuatha Dé Danann could not remain in peace without facing what had ruled the land before them. This opposing force was known as the Fomorians, embodying everything the Tuatha Dé Danann were not: chaos, darkness, and the raw strength of unshaped nature. The meeting of the 2 races could only lead to conflict. But before the battle began, the Celtic people believed the very earth felt the widening divide: one side carrying the clarity of knowledge, the other the untamed hunger of the abyss. Within every person of that age, as within the hills draped in purple heather and the cold running streams, the opposition was more than myth. It was a question: would order endure, or would chaos ascend? And to answer this question, the legends lead us to the inevitable encounter, the place where Tuatha Dé Danann and Fomorians meet in a clash so vast that sea, sky, and stone rise as witnesses. On a wind-swept field opening into dawn, where light and shadow touch without merging, the next story ignites. This is no longer the tale of wandering spirits, but the battle between 2 ancient essences of the world, a battle that would shape the fate of Ireland for generations. Long before the Tuatha Dé Danann set foot upon Irish soil, the Celtic people believed the land already had rulers, not humans, not gentle gods, but a race born of deep water, storm shadow, and the untamed corners of the world. They were the Fomorians, beings shaped by primordial nature, where strength had no boundaries and order had never been spoken into existence. In the oldest tales, the Fomorians possess no single form. They are the embodiment of chaos. Some have 1 eye, 1 arm, and 1 leg. Some tower higher than sea cliffs. Some are hunched, twisted, or bear features no language can describe. Some dwell beneath the earth, some beneath the waves, but most of their power rises from the sea, where tides carry both fury and ruin through every season. The Celts called them those who come from below, not only because they emerge from ocean and abyss, but because they represented forces beyond human mastery: storms, plagues, failed harvests, cattle dying suddenly when sea mist crept inland. In the eyes of the ancestors, any natural disaster too vast to comprehend could be the footprint of a Fomorian. When the Tuatha Dé Danann arrived, their meeting was inevitable. New order collided with ancient force, not from hatred, but because the world could not hold these opposing principles side by side. The tension between them was like the air before a storm, quiet, but trembling with the weight of what must come. Under King Nuada, the clash became undeniable. Nuada lost his hand in an early skirmish, and by the laws of his people, a king had to be unblemished. He was forced to yield the throne. Into that power gap stepped the Fomorians, who gained control of Ireland through Brez, a ruler of mixed blood, Tuatha Dé Danann through his mother, Fomorian through his father. If the Tuatha belonged to light, Brez revealed the shadow cast by that light. Under his rule, the Tuatha were oppressed, driven to labor as servants, while ritual and law were twisted to serve the will of the Fomorians. Famine spread, fields failed, villages fell silent. The Celts said it was an age when the sun felt distant, and the sea seemed closer, colder, and heavier with grief. Yet within that darkness, resistance began to kindle. Nuada was restored through a silver arm, crafted by Dian Sect. And when Lug Lamfada, the youth gifted in every art, entered the council of the Tuatha Dé Danann, the scales began to shift. Lug was the grandson of Balor, the most feared of all Fomorians, whose evil eye could annihilate armies with a single opening of its lid. Because Lug carried both bloodlines, he became the one bridge capable of overturning unjust rule. The conflict between Tuatha Dé Danann and Fomorians was not merely a war of gods and monsters. It was the struggle between two world principles: creation versus destruction, knowledge versus raw instinct, seasons measured in rhythm versus storms that arrive without warning. Everything converged toward one destiny, the greatest battle in Irish myth, where the future of the land would be forged not only by weapons, but by the very essences of light and shadow. And at the center of that confrontation, two names, Lu and Balor, moved toward each other like opposing heartbeats destined to collide on the battlefield of Mag Tuatha. Legend says that on certain mornings in Ireland, the sun does not rise along its familiar curve, but seems lifted by an unseen force. Slow, heavy, as if pushing past something blocking the horizon. The old people believed this was the echo of the oldest moment in mythic time, the day Tuatha Dé Danann and the Fomorians entered their final, decisive battle, the Battle of Mag Tuatha. The field of Mag Tuatha lies quiet beneath its hills, yet in Celtic memory, it never truly rests. They saw in it the breath of two opposing powers, light sliding across the grass like a thin blade, and darkness pooling beneath the soil like deep water. This was no simple clash between gods and monsters. It was the collision of two world principles: order and chaos, knowledge and instinct, creation and destruction. In the days before the battle, the Tuatha Dé Danann regained their strength. Nuada bore a new silver arm. Dagda carried a staff that could kill or restore life. And above all, Lu Lamfada, the youth skilled in every craft, was chosen to lead them. Lug's power was not only in combat. He was a smith, a musician, a poet, a hunter, a builder, and a strategist, unmatched by any. In a time when darkness gathered, only someone carrying such many-shaped light could guide the people. On the other side, Balor of the Evil Eye, chief of the Fomorians, and Lug's own grandfather waited. Balor needed no weapon. His single, deadly eye remained sealed beneath a heavy lid. When opened, it could scour an entire field to ash. The old people believed the eye was not fire, but the essence of ending itself, where every living thing collapses into stillness. When the two forces met, the wind over Mag Tuatha shifted. The grass bent in one direction, pulled as if by the weight of the Fomorians, while the sky brightened in answer to the steps of the Tuatha. The battle began not with a scream, but with the meeting of two powers older than language. In the chaos, Balor advanced, and his warriors hauled up his eyelid with hooks and ropes. The poisonous brilliance poured out, sweeping across the field like the sea swallowing sand. But Lu, born of both bloodlines, half shadow and half light, knew that brute force could not defeat Balor. only precision could. He raised his sling, the simplest of Celtic weapons, and released a stone with all the mastery he possessed. The stone struck Balor's eye, driving it backward through his skull, turning the deadly gaze back upon the Fomorian ranks. Panic broke them. Many fell beneath the destructive light meant for their enemies. With Balor's fall, the balance shifted at once. The Tuatha Dé Danann claimed victory, but they did not destroy the Fomorians. They only thinned the power of chaos. The world could not exist on light alone. The Celts understood this. They merely pushed the darkness back into the place it belonged. After Mag Tuatha, the land of Ireland was given to the Tuatha Dé Danann to govern, but their triumph was not everlasting. One day, a new people, the Milesians, would arrive, and when they did, the Tuatha would not wage another war. They would step away from the surface world, pass into the hollow hills, and become the Iosi, the ancestors of all fairy lore to come. Yet before they withdrew, another shadow moved across the Celtic sky, one not born of order or chaos, but of unrest among the dead. For above the living world, a host of wandering souls began to gather. They were not quiet like the Banshee, nor bound to duty like Cusith. They moved as a swarm. They travelled on the wind, and they always sought whatever was missing in a soul on the verge of departing. When Ireland was given back to the Tuatha Dé Danann after the Battle of Mag Tuatha, people believed order had finally settled and darkness had retreated from human life. But not every darkness withdrew to the deep sea or hid in ancient stone. Some belonged to another kind of spirit, neither Fomorian, nor divine, nor any longer mortal. These spirits had no home to reclaim, and when night fell, they moved as a long, drifting host across the sky, like a black ribbon of smoke that never dispersed. The Celtic people called them Sluagh. Sluagh were often described as forsaken souls, those who died in bitterness or wrongdoing, rejected by earth, sky, and sea alike. They became wandering silhouettes, thin as wings, sharp as winter wind. When they moved, the ground did not tremble. The air changed direction, as though an invisible hand were sweeping the sky. The people believed the Sluagh came from the west, the direction of sunset, the direction of endings. And so, in many parts of the Highlands, when someone was near death, families would shut every west-facing window to keep that person's soul from being taken. For the Sluagh did not seek to kill. They sought to fill the emptiness in their ranks. One new soul meant one more wing beat, one more breath, one more thread of force added to their drifting host. Some tales say the Sluagh carry invisible weapons, tiny elf arrows like slivers of light. These arrows leave no wound, but they drain a person into a strange illness. The body grows weak, the face pales, the eyes drift into distance, as though a piece of the soul has slipped away. It is sorrow that gets pulled from them, not blood. Yet what terrified people most was not their shape, but their sound. Not a scream, not a howl, but a cry like birdsong that is not birdsong, an uneven, trembling note woven into the wind, like the lament of memories that cannot find rest. It was said that if this sound rose over open fields at night, one should lie flat against the ground and avoid letting moonlight touch the face. For if the Sluagh spotted a solitary figure, they might believe that soul was ready to leave. Legends also tell of nights when the Sluagh passed over a home where someone lay ill. The air would chill, the lamplight would waver, the breath of the sick would thin to a thread. If the family failed to shut the windows in time or turn the dying person eastward, the soul could be pulled from the body and swept into the Sluagh, taken without a single word spoken. In the world of symbols, the Sluagh embody the lost dead, the parts of humanity that go unburied, unacknowledged, unloved. They represent the fear of never finding rest, never being remembered, never returning to the soil of one's homeland. But while the Sluagh drift across the sky like a stream of restless memory, the earth below keeps its own stories. Stories not of souls in the wind, but of creatures hidden in deep water, where darkness has weight and danger comes from the silence of the lake. And in West Wales, where mountains lean toward cold, still waters, one such creature waits in the night, unable to fly, unable to steal souls by name, yet capable of plunging an entire valley into darkness with a single sweep of its body. In the cold valleys of Wales, where moss-coated mountains lean close to the lake's surface, the water holds a stillness unlike any other. It does not mirror the clear skies of the Scottish lochs, nor does it churn like the Irish Sea. The water here simply waits a silence, so dense it feels as though you are staring into something that knows how to stare back. The Celtic people believed such stillness was no accident. It was the breath of the afanc, the creature that dwells in the depths where light does not enter. No description of the afanc agrees with another. Some say it resembles a monstrous beaver. Others insist it has crocodile scales. Still, others describe it only as a shifting mass of darkness beneath deep water. These differences do not contradict. They reflect the fears of the storyteller. Those who live near rivers see it as a creature of the current. Those near lakes see it as a beast of the stagnant deep. Only one detail remains constant across every tale. The afanc embodies a force humanity cannot control. For the villages surrounding Llyn Afanc and Llyn Barfog, the afanc was no distant legend. It explained real calamities: boats capsizing on calm nights, livestock vanishing at the water's edge, or worse, floods that swallowed entire valleys. The Celtic mind did not believe in disasters without cause. Anything too strong, too sudden, and too vast to escape had to belong to a spirit. And in Wales, that spirit was the afanc. One of the most well-known versions tells of villagers who tried many times to kill the afanc, but failed. Weapons could not pierce its hide. Ropes could not restrain it. So they turned to a method common in Celtic lore, not destruction, but relocation. They sought a young woman, gentle, beautiful, hoping her quiet presence could lull the creature to sleep. When the afanc laid its head in her lap, sinking into a slumber heavy as silt, the villagers bound it in iron chains and harnessed it to the strongest oxen in the region. But once dragged from the water, the afanc erupted in fury. The ground shook as though an earthquake split it. The chains strained to breaking. One ox was torn from its yoke and bolted into the mountains, leaving hoofprints carved deep into the stone marks, still known in Wales as Creigiau Afanc. At last, they moved the creature to a distant, deeper lake, far from human homes. But the girl, the only being it had ever rested upon, died moments later. The afanc's anguished roar shattered her heart. The story never says it harmed her, only that a human heart cannot withstand the lament of a spirit torn from its home. Another tale says the knight Peredur, later woven into the Arthurian cycle, slew the afanc using a magic stone that rendered him invisible. Unable to see its attacker, the afanc thrashed blindly, exposing a weakness. Peredur's final strike ended the creature, but the lake's waters turned dark for days afterward, as if mourning what had been lost. Whichever version one hears, the message remains the same. When something is too powerful to master, humans can only avoid it, redirect it, or respect it. In the language of archetype, the afanc is the sleeping danger, a threat that lies quiet and harmless until someone wanders too close. And after the afanc's mark fades on the stone, the Celtic tale shifts again away from deep waters and towards small running streams, away from brute force and toward quiet omen, away from monsters and toward a strange woman forever bent over the water's edge, washing the one garment no one wishes to see, the clothing of fate itself. In the narrow valleys of the highlands, where grey cliffs rise sharply and streams run through moss thick as old carpets, there are nights when the wind is still, yet the water trembles. A traveller hearing the ripple may think it is a fish until, looking down, they see a small figure bent over the bank, thin arms washing something pale beneath the moon. A cloth, a cloak, a funeral shroud soaked through. And in that instant, they know they have seen Bean Nigger, the death washer of Scotland. Bean Nigger is not like the Banshee, though both bear the final message of a life. The Banshee is the cry of a bloodline. Bean Nigh is the silence of fate. She does not stand at the threshold of homes. She does not wail. She simply washes repeating destiny with the rhythm of her hands, steady and tireless, as though the world itself stays unchanged while someone's future quietly seals. Many tales describe her as so small she resembles a child, but when she lifts her face, it is aged, twisted, with a single remaining tooth and one seeing eye. Each time she bends, her long, wet hair coils over her shoulders like strands binding fate to her form. Some say her legs are rough and bird-like. Others claim she is the spirit of a woman who died in childbirth, trapped between worlds, unable to depart or return. She washes the garment of someone who is about to die, not just anyone, but someone belonging to the land where she stands. If it is a warrior's cloth, he will fall in battle before dawn. If it is the shawl of a village woman, her household will soon prepare a funeral. And if it belongs to a stranger, it means fate has already stepped ahead of their footsteps. Yet Bean Niga is not entirely closed off like the waters she works in. Some stories insist that if a person approaches her gently, careful not to splash the water, and asks her 3 questions, she must answer. And if the person shows kindness, she may grant 3 small gifts: the name of the one destined to die, the way to delay that death, or the knowledge of whether the approaching loss belongs to someone they love. But if she sees them first, if the living step into the place reserved for the dead, there is no negotiation. Once her eye meets theirs, fate is sealed. Bean Niga does not kill. She merely confirms what has already been decided in realms beyond mortal reach. In the language of symbols, Bean Niga embodies the fate, the one stationed at the boundary no one wishes to cross. If the Banshee is the sob of sorrow, Bean Niga is the quiet hand washing what must come. She does not warn so that people may escape. She warns so they may accept. And when she rises, clutching the cloth to her chest and slipping into the night, the stream becomes calm once more, as though no one ever knelt at its edge. Yet the Celts believed that wherever she has just vanished, a faint chill lingers, a shadow of death resting briefly on the stone. When her story passes across the hills, people speak of another spirit, one that offers no omen, no shroud, but walks within the darkness of ruined castles, its heavy form and ember-dim eyes, reminding all who see it that some boundaries were never meant to be crossed. In the old tales of the Isle of Man and Ulster, the Celtic people speak of 2 spirits that belong neither to deep forest nor to open sea, and not entirely to darkness. One stands guard where humans are not meant to enter. The other keeps a household from slipping into disorder. One is silent as stone, the other is earth-stained and humble. And between them, 2 faces of the same human need appear, the need to protect what is fragile in a mortal life. On the Isle of Man, at the ancient stronghold of Peel Castle, the night is said to fall heavier than anywhere else. When the last sunlight touches the tallest stone of the battlements, a dark shape appears carved from shadow, solid as coal, a dog massive as a calf, fur black as smoke, eyes yellow yet never shining. It walks the old corridors each night, slow-footed and soundless. This is Moddy Dhu, the black hound who guards the castle's boundary. The guards feared it at first, but over time, they saw that Moddy Dhu never attacked. It followed the same path each night, from the western gate, through the guardroom, along a narrow passage, and into a small sealed chamber. No one dared to enter. No one knew what the room held. No one wished to know. The people believed Moddy Dhu was stationed there to guard what lay within, not letting it out, and not letting the living wander in. Until one night, a young guard, emboldened by drink, decided to follow the black hound into the forbidden chamber. No scream was heard, but when he returned, his face was pale as wax, his eyes wide yet seeing nothing. He died before dawn. After that, the chamber door was sealed forever, and Moddy Dhu continued its nightly patrol, as if reminding humankind that some places must be respected by not knowing. Far from the silence of Peel Castle, in the farmlands of Ulster, another spirit moved among mortals. Grogoch, a small shaggy being covered in tangled hair, mud clinging to his feet, and the scent of the fields upon his skin. Grogoch did not hide in darkness. He wandered openly, gentle as soil itself. He helped with work, cutting grass, carrying sheaves, lighting fires, turning the wheel of the mill. No one hired him. No one summoned him. He appeared whenever a household had too much to manage and too few hands to bear it. But like the brownie, Grogoch refused payment. If anyone offered money or fine clothing, he would leave at once, disappearing into rain and never returning. His help could only be kept through respect and simplicity, two pillars of Celtic life. Modidu and Grogoch, though utterly different, form a quiet pair of opposites. One guards the boundary, one guards the home, one warns against stepping too far, one warns against letting things collapse inward. Both stand at the edges of human life, yet each protects a different corner of the world, the threshold and the warmth within it. And when their tales are told, the Celtic storyteller's voice often softens, as if preparing to cross into deeper territory. For beyond boundaries and guardianship lie spirits whose only purpose is to test humans through beauty, temptation, or promises that never fully belong to this world. And in that fragile darkness, the last breath of Celtic myth carries us toward its closing chapter, where creatures of allure, fear, and curiosity converge into the enduring memory of this ancient land. As the stories of Celtic spirits fade into the last mist of evening, the land seems to settle back into its natural, unhurried breath. Yet once one has walked through every shadowed figure, from the cry of the Banshee, the heavy tread of the Dullahan, the sorrow of the Selkie, the rage of the Nuckelavee, to the deceiving glow of the Willow, the Wisp, and the fateful bark of Cusith, it becomes clear these beings were never meant only for nighttime telling. They were how the Celtic people looked at their world, and how they looked inward at themselves. In every tale, nature is not a backdrop. Nature is a character. The sea is not merely water, it carries memory. The forest is not merely trees, it has intention. The marsh is not merely soft earth, it is the edge of understanding. And the sky, where the sluer drift like unquiet memories, is where humans place everything that lies beyond their grasp. Tuatha Dé Danann and the Fomorians, the twin poles of light and shadow, do more than define a mythic age. They define the division within every human mind, one part seeking order, comprehension, mastery, the other knowing that some forces are older, larger, and will never bow to human will. The Battle of Mag Tuatha is not only a war on a field, it is the struggle the Celtic people recognized within themselves whenever they stood between desire and fear. Diagdu, Binige, Afank, Modidu, Grogoch. Each is a fragment of something deeply human, a way to name the worries that cannot be spoken. Sorrow, isolation, betrayal, loss, sudden disaster. The quiet boundaries everyone senses but few dare to admit. And in the end, when all myth is told, what remains is not the monster. What remains is the human being. Humans created the Banshee to say that death never arrives alone. Created the Selkie to say that some hearts do not belong where they live. Created the Will, the Wisp, to warn that false light can be irresistible. Created Cusith to explain the fear of being summoned before one is ready. Created the Sluer to accept that not every soul finds rest. And created the Tuatha Dé Danann to believe that knowledge, craft, and light can reshape the world even for a moment. These stories, through centuries, do not disappear. They only dim and return in new forms, like moonlight gliding over the surface of a lake, never still, but always present. They endure to remind us that the world is not made of what we see, but of what we feel, the fragility of life, the vastness of nature, and the mysteries humanity has never fully untangled. As the Celtic night closes, we understand that each legend is a mirror, not reflecting the face, but reflecting fear, hope, loss, and the things humans long to protect. These beings, whether fierce, gentle, or lonely, are the shapes that ancient minds gave to quiet, enduring truths. And when we step out of this mythic world, we carry what the Celts always knew. Every legend lives again the moment someone is willing to listen.